Well, there's nothing I like more than being in a room with doctors. I'm sitting here with Sherry Greenberg, Dr. Karl Maret, and Dr. Tom Budzynski. And all three of you have stepped outside of the orthodox box, as they say. And your involvement in LifeWave is an indicator of that, because in orthodox medicine, the idea of nanotechnology patches doesn't really fit into the curriculum. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Budzynski. How did you get involved in LifeWave?
Well, I was giving a lecture in Heidelberg, Germany, and that's how I met Karl. And later on, he gave me some patches, strange patches. I took them home and I put them in my bathroom, and I just sat there for about a month and a half. And one day I thought, I should try these things. And I'd been going to a gym regularly for years, and so I put the patches on. I went to the gym. I knew what my weight limits were, and I was about 30-40% stronger that day. And I thought, hey, these things really work. And so that's how I got started with LifeWave.
And how did you get involved, Dr. Maret?
Well, I've been interested in energy medicine and cell energy research for a long time. And I actually heard about them when I read an article about them. And I said to myself, if these work as advertised, then they might be a very useful way to demonstrate how subtle energy processes happen in the human body, because nothing went into the body transdermally. So I contacted David Schmidt and talked to him about it, the inventor of LifeWave. And I also was friends with a chap, Richard Quick, who was then coach at Stanford with the women's swimming team. And I introduced it to him and said, you might want to check these out, because we really need some measures to see how they affect athletic performance, because that's what they were claimed to enhance. And we did that, and they started using them then in the Olympic trials back in, I think, 2004 in Long Beach, and they caused quite a commotion. And I think that's when a lot of things really started happening in LifeWave, that Richard Quick teamed up with David Schmidt to start testing them on the women athletes. And so I've been interested in it ever since and started doing research on it about recently.
When you say cause a commotion, what does that mean?
Well, there was quite a bit of concern that there might be some kind of doping going on. And in the Olympic athletes, you don't want to use anything that might be performance enhancing in any way. And here were some patches, and normally in medicine, patches are given in order to introduce a pharmaceutical agent, a hormone or something similar, into the body in a controlled dosage way. But here nothing went into the body, and they ultimately got cleared from the American Olympic Commission that they were quite safe. And then athletes started using them, and then the word spread by word of mouth that they seemed to enhance performance, and the rest is history.
From a layperson's perspective, it's hard to understand how can something work, and it's about the infrared light in your body. Can you explain that?
You'd like me to explain it?
Yeah.
Well, the patches work on the infrared system and the reflection that it happens that emanates from within us. I was in Houston, Texas, where I was first introduced. I was presenting a seminar, and I was used as the guinea pig because I was the speaker. And, the muscle testing and how they strengthened me, I was duly impressed. And then David walked into my door one day unannounced as a patient. No, well, announced, but I mean, surprisingly as a patient. And we ended up collaborating. But the system runs through, the subtle energy systems are run through the infrared system of the body. And it definitely stimulates all organs throughout the body in an amazingly rapid sequence.
How do you use the patches in your practice?
My practice, I use them mostly to stimulate the detox in the body and get the system going. Actually, it's more for drainage than detox. There are two things. There's drainage and there's detox. LifeWave patches are amazing at stimulating drainage. And then my job is to get the organs working depending upon the integrity of the patient. I want the organs to be working really well so that they can take on the amazingness of the patches and detox the body. So it's up to us to detox, up to the patches to provide the drainage.
The whole concept of keeping your organs and glands strengthened is a new concept in alternative medicine. Can you explain to me how you're able to gauge this?
Well, our body naturally has a detoxification capacity, but in today's world it gets somewhat overwhelmed. You want to find out how to get the body to respond in this modern environment optimally, and nutrition is extremely important because the body has many antioxidant systems that take care of free radicals, which are like unpaired electrons, which cause aging. So that's one level of detoxification. That's very physiological and normal. But then there's many other processes that take place. For example, chemicals or heavy metals that are abundant in today's environment. And they especially affect the major detoxification organ in the body, which is the liver. And so we test the functionality of the liver with what's called functional detoxification profiles, which in this process you give somebody a tracer substance, say aspirin, or a substance like a Tylenol tablet, and you measure how soon it comes out in the saliva and in the urine. That's a much more useful functional test of detoxification capacity of the liver than measuring liver enzymes, which measure pathology or the breakdown of the liver, which have these enzymes appear in the blood. So that's one technique, for example.
If I can jump in, I would like to say that you can clean the liver, but you have to have the synchronicity of all the organs speaking to one another. So, and if you've got a liver that's really clean, but it doesn't want to talk to the gallbladder or to the pancreas or to the small intestine, large intestine, then you're in trouble. So I use, other informational medical systems to get the integration of the systems speaking to one another.
Right.
Well, that would kind of go right into your line of work, because you deal with, as a psychoanalyst, stress, right?
Yeah, on a more macro level than what these good folks were talking about. The one thing that we found out about the energy patches right off the bat was that, and using them myself, was that it seemed to reduce the little stresses that occur in every day. Somebody calls up and cancels an appointment at the last moment. It doesn't bother you. Little things like that. And my patients begin to notice that too. And so that's what we aimed our first research study at, was what can we measure that shows this de-stressing reaction of the energy patches. And we found it with heart rate variability study. That's a very big growing area of research right now, is heart rate variability. In other words, you take the heart rate, the EKG, and you spectral analyze it, which is a mathematical technique of breaking it down into different frequency bands. And one of them, it's called very low frequency, is a band that stands out when you're stressed or anxious or fearful. And we can see that in our patients. Now, would the energy patches lower that? That's what we hoped would happen, and that indeed did happen. We did a double-blind placebo study where half the people got placebos, and we didn't know which ones were which. A third person assigned that. And indeed it did. It did reduce that VLF component of the spectral analysis of the heart rate variability, and that explained to me, at least, on that level. Now, you guys are into really tiny molecular things and hormonal things and so on, but on that level, it told me that these patches were doing something very special.
Kind of like a lie detector test.
I was just going to say, it sounds like an updated version of the lie detector.
Exactly.
Well, it actually changed something in the heart. And then I'll talk later about another study that we did that shows what the X15 patches did for the heart.
What did they do?
Well, the idea there was, again, to use the very nice instrumentation system that we have called Biocom, which enables us to break the heart results down into very fine patterns. And it can look at autonomic balance. In other words, the heart is innervated by both sympathetic nerves and parasympathetic nerves.
That's the autonomic nervous system.
Yes, the autonomic nervous system. The fight or flight system is the sympathetic. I don't know why they call it the sympathetic. It always seemed to me like the wrong name for that system.
That's fight or flight?
Yeah.
Right.
And it should be the other one, But anyway, that speeds the heart. when you need fast heart rate to get away from danger. When the danger is over, then the parasympathetic feeds into the heart to slow it down more, and that's good. Now, in the resting condition, it should be more balanced, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. When they've done studies of large groups of people, they find that the heart balance occurs in a healthy individual. And so what we are able to measure and monitor very carefully, and you can see on the diagram that what happens, and this is a diagram showing heart autonomic balance going through the heart, that once you give people the patch, this little dot moves from a position of unbalance in that chart down right to the center, indicating a balance of innervation to the heart. And so some very important and powerful things are happening with the heart and the autonomic system. You're decreasing the sympathetic drive, which means that you decrease stress, and you're increasing the parasympathetic effect to the heart, which means you're into a more relaxation recovery mode.
Are people either parasympathetic or sympathetic? Are we types, or do we switch in life?
That's a very good question, and my favorite professor at UCLA, Dr. Gus Wenger, his real name was Marion Wenger, but he didn't like Marion, so he went by Gus. He did a most interesting experiment. He took 2,000 aviation cadets, very healthy guys, passed their physicals that were going to flight school, World War II. And he examined them with about 8 different autonomic variables, volar, forum, some kinds that they don't even use anymore. Volar, forum, conduction. He put these dentist rolls in their mouth that soak up saliva, you know, like you get from a dentist. And he would measure the weight of the roll, which meant if you had heavier weight, that you were in more of parasympathetic mode, and so on. And he assigned these people one number called A bar, depending on how these 8 variables looked, so that there was a bell-shaped curve, and at one end he had sympathetically dominated people. At the other end he had parasympathetically dominated people, and it balanced in the middle. Now, here's the interesting part. 15 to 20 years later, he sends out questionnaires. Now, talk about anti-aging. He sends this out to these fellas, and he got 700 back out of the original 2,000. Now, you know how it is with questionnaires on health. You're not going to send it in if you're not feeling good. If you think you did okay, you might send it in. If you feel really bad, or if you're dead, you don't send it in. So he had 700 were volunteered to send back the questionnaire, and this is what he found out. Fascinating. Almost all the disease process that these people had encountered were in that little group of sympathetically dominated individuals. Very few were in the other end of things. There was asthma and I think ulcers were parasympathetic. Yeah. And so what does that tell you? It tells you that if you don't know how to handle stress in the long run, you're probably going to get sick.
You're in trouble.
I mean, essentially we have both systems active all the time, and it's a dynamic dance. It's called homeostasis, or homeodynamics is even a better term. But most people tend to be more in the sympathetic activated state longer nowadays. And we were interested in, when we studied the patches using similar equipment, we saw that there was a change towards the parasympathetic fairly quickly. That means more relaxation, more adaptation, lower heart rates, greater ability to digest your food, because that's what you do in the parasympathetic state. So it's essentially more of a relaxation response.
What patches specifically?
We tested the energy patches. We've tested some other ones now, but that's the one that we've completed. We tested the glutathione patches. But invariably, there is a positive activation of the parasympathetic or relaxation state to a greater degree. And not in everybody. Of course, not uniform. It depends where the people start from. But since most people have a slightly higher sympathetic arousal state, it's very, very positive for them.
In my opinion, as toxins build up, we become more sympathetic. And because our sympathetic nervous system gets turned on from the stress of having to cope with the toxins. And then as you spend time detoxing or detraining, like it's in training. When detoxing to me is like I'm in training. I'm constantly in training, keeping the toxins out. So you can train yourself also to stay in parasympathetic, or you can put a patch on and you don't have to worry as much about the training because it kind of does it for you. And it's lovely because then the less toxins you have in the body, the more you can spend time in the parasympathetic nervous system. And then what happens is you can actually live life as opposed to existing through life, which is constant reacting to your life.
What's interesting about what all three of you are saying is the ramifications of the nanotechnology patches. They say that in today's world, we experience more stress in a single day than people of Elizabethan times did in their entire lifetime. So if stress is connected to disease, if the patches bring us over to our parasympathetic.
Right, they do.
And I imagine you mean then the rest of your lifestyle also has to
follow.
So in your work, is this part of what you are trying to teach your patients?
Absolutely.
To live to switch over to being a parasympathetic type?
A lot of it's about languaging, how you language to yourself. You know, if this is going to be so hard. Say, no, I'm looking forward to the challenge of this. Mm-hmm. You know, you relanguage their system. And then once you relanguage, your body can relax and go into the parasympathetic system, you know. And then you raise their awareness of, I do the nutritional awareness, you know, of what we need to do in this country and the world. And every country is different where you travel, what you can do about your nutrition. You know, everyone offers different luxuries that you can do in certain places where you can't do them in other places, and you need to be educated on that.
I think the most difficult place to eat well is the United States.
It is.
If you've ever taken a driving trip,
without a doubt,
there's no food on our highways.
No.
There's a lot of restaurants, but there's no food.
But in Italy there is.
In Italy, there's some family making something wonderful.
You know, you can go to Italy and you can eat big.
You can sin.
And you don't gain weight.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
True. And you don't get that headache from their wine. I mean, what are we doing here? It's
well, it's also, first of all, how it's grown, what kind of soil it's grown.
Correct.
We're losing a lot of nutrition because our topsoils are getting depleted. Then it's how it's processed. You know, I would say fast food, fast death. You know, it's
I'd say more and better. It has to be more and better here, as opposed to real, and less is more.
Right.
You know.
So let's take that is a fait accompli. So what would the patches be able to accomplish if we're not getting the nutrition that we once got from our food?
Well, I think that's a difficult question to answer scientifically. What would the patches do? It's not so simple. Most people thought once we cracked the genome, you know, we could kind of read off the software of the human body, you know, in a certain way as computer code, and we could just fix it. Now we're finding that what actually turns the genes on, and that they're very dynamic in signaling. I mean, human genes are sometimes less in number than certain plants. So it isn't the numbers of genes, it's how they're organized complexly and how they get activated by environmental factors. That's the key thing here. So if we change something like wearing patches or eating proper food or getting exercise or getting proper shielding against electromagnetic radiation or whatever it is, all of that tends to have proper healthy expression of the genes that are supposed to keep you healthy and prevent the genes being activated that can cause diseases or imbalances.
And where does biofeedback come in this, and what is biofeedback?
In my office, I can give people a jump by giving them frequencies and exposing them to the frequencies that the body needs. Say the liver is supposed to vibrate at a certain frequency and it's low. Well, if I remind the liver, hey, you're supposed to be vibrating at this frequency with biofeedback, then what happens is the liver will begin to pick up some of that and say, oh, I remember how I used to be now.
It's such an interesting way to approach health in the body, from managing stress to strengthening organs and glands, to understanding the effects of toxicity, the toxic burden we're all carrying around. It's such a different approach than the allopathic, here's your symptom, here's your drug.
To answer that question again about biofeedback, and essentially, originally the term was coined when people like Elmer Green and others wanted to allow the body to gain some degree of self-management, some degree of awareness of different, normally unconscious processes, like autonomic nervous system processes are often unconscious. You can not normally know what your brain is doing, but if you could visualize the brain waves and feed you back information, then you can learn how to control, say, more alpha states or more theta states, which are different frequency ranges that the brain is operating in. So that's one type of biofeedback. Now, there's also awareness of other unconscious processes that you can do through, say, conductance of the skin. If you measure the degree of sweating, that is called galvanic skin response. That's another degree of saying I'm aroused, or I have too much stress, etc. However, there's another way of measuring things by resonance in the body. The body works through resonant processes all the time, energetically. It works through light processes called biophotons at the cellular level. All the cells are in constant communication, and that communication is very coherent. In other words, the waves that speak to each other are like tuning forks that resonate very tightly together.
What does that have to do with aging? Biophotons?
Well, as we age, we lose that degree of coherence. It's like the tuning forks don't resonate so well together, and then light starts to spill out. And what we did in deciding to see what could we determine whether these patches were, for example, having an effect on these biophoton emissions. You have to use very, very sophisticated equipment, photomultiplier tubes, which pick up very, very sensitive photons of light. They're very low levels. You have to be in a totally darkened room, in a darkened chamber, in a darkened room, and then you can measure these emanations from the body. If the body is leaking light out, then it's becoming incoherent. When the body has less leakage of light, it's becoming more coherent and healthier because the cells are keeping the communication internal. It's, you might say, noise is spilling out. Cancer cells give out more light, and they've measured that. The Germans have done a lot of work, the Russians. This goes back to the studies way into 1925 or so, when Gurvich in Russia first called this radiation that was given off by the body mitogenic radiation. Now we know it's actually light in the blue part of the spectrum and in the ultraviolet. And all the cells communicate like that. So if we can give a patch to somebody and see a decrease in degree of biophoton emission, then we're seeing that they're actually getting healthier. And we could perhaps suggest that that might have a long-term anti-aging effect. Aging is going to happen to everybody, but the rate of aging is what you want to slow down.
What I'm getting from all of this is a very sophisticated new approach to aging, to health, in something that appears to be so uncomplicated, which is a little patch.
Correct.
Well, there's a great mystery here. That's what interested me as a scientist to want to research it. And we're using probably some of the most sophisticated technology to study the meridian systems of the body. Now, meridians are very ancient understanding in traditional Chinese medicine. And we don't know physiologically exactly where they run. We surmise that they're in the connective tissue matrix underneath the skin. They have to do with the hydration and how water molecules are organized and all the different proteins like hyaluronic acid and so on that organize this water, that create these conduction channels for electrical charges to move. So we now can hook up a subject, and we're doing this now in research at the California Institute for Human Science, which is probably some of the best equipment on the planet right now for studying this. We hook up 28 points on the fingers and on the toes, have the subject sit there, and in every 5 seconds we can measure the acupuncture meridians and exactly see what happens to the energetic system based on these electrical measurements. And from that we can analyze what happens when you put on the patch and how soon does it change. And it's amazing. We can see these changes and document them, and we can see shifts when we put an energy patch, say, on the kidney, one point on the bottom of the sole of the foot, that in a very short time you get a change that it means that the energy from the meridian moves from the upper meridians down to the lower meridians, and we can document that statistically very significant effect.
Well, I thank you all very much. I think in an era of all-time high stress and an environmental assault unlike anything human beings have ever before experienced, that it's a leap of faith from my perspective, because I can't see my meridians. I can't feel what the patches are doing other than the energy patches, but it makes sense. And keep on doing your great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.